listening to the Patriot Nation podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriots Nation podcast presented by Game Time, which is the official sports ticketing app of CLNS Media. It's your guy, Pat Lane, as always here with my guy, Matt St. Jean. And Matt, listen, we knew football was already back, right? But I feel like when the pads finally come on, now football is really back. And it was so great seeing them out there hitting today. It was nice.
The Pats put out a video which said that the Patriots social media has been very active posting clips from training camp, which is new. They had one, not too long before this episode where they were out there, they had the guys mic'd up. You could hear the pads are showing the hitting, and that's what the sport's all about. God love the physicality. We know that this team in particular, the way they are built on defense, the way they are built on offense, it's going to be about playing physically. It's going to be about winning in the trenches. So for this group in particular, too, that's huge. And I'd love to get the sound of the helmets hitting and pads clashing. That's what the sport's about, baby.
Yep, it's the whole thing, right? And especially for this team in particular, I feel like there's so many questions about the offensive line in particular, right? And how the offensive line is going to hold up and what it's going to look like. And I will tell you, for day one, at least, for one day, felt pretty good about the way the offensive line looked. Now, David Andrews was out today. Who knows how long he's out for? I don't know if he's out for an extended period of time, if it's something that was a one-day thing. We have no idea, right? We got no information about that. So hopefully it was nothing, and he'll be back tomorrow. But, Nick Leverett stepped in at center and played pretty well, I thought. I didn't notice, any really glaring differences in the middle. Again, it was one practice in one day. But they ran the ball pretty well, and Caden Wallace looked pretty good at left tackle. They even ran a play where him and City So went out and pulled on a toss play. That looked pretty nice. Like that's, I was happy to see it. Again, it's one day. It's not a big deal. And, for the most part, he wasn't blocking, but he blocked Dietrich Wise a few times. He blocked Godchaux once or twice. So he was blocking some of the big guys over there. And so, we'll see what happens over the course of time. But for day one, at least, I was pretty happy.
Yeah. And it's, it's, you got to take some of the offensive line stuff with a grain of salt right now because, obviously we're going to get into this probably after this in the show, but no Christian Barmore right now. Devon Godchaux there, not a full participant in 11-on-11 stuff. He wasn't in full pads. He was out there, but not doing everything.
He was out there for 11-on-11.
They were, all of the blog writers were saying for at least some of the heavier 11-on-11 stuff, he was coming out. It was not in for all the plays at least.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Matthew Judon, we're also going to be getting into this situation, not out there. So It's a different front than you would typically see, largely a backup defensive line front.
Yeah.
But at least when it came to the running game, the Patriots offensive line handled their business, which is what you want to see. And I think, the point of comparison for the offense for me is always going to be 2 years ago when they tried the outside zone scheme with Matt Patricia there. And the point where we knew that things went wrong was day one with pads on when they're trying to do running plays and they can't execute anything because assignments are getting missed on every single snap. The fact that I don't think any of us expected the running game to be anything spectacular this year. The fact that they're out there and it actually looks good right now. Like I think if we came into this and especially day one and said, hey, the offensive line in the running game looks respectable. They're getting a couple of yards to carry. The guys know where they're supposed to be. We'd be thrilled. The fact that it's like creating holes, that's awesome. I know Taylor Kyles has been giving a ton of love to Scott Peters, the offensive line coach, on his Twitter account, sharing all kinds of videos with him. And the offensive linemen seem to love him. That was something that Caden Wallace talked this week about feeling like it was a fit in New England because of Scott Peters and really liking that connection. And I think we were, obviously this is day one of pads, so a lot of time here, but we were somewhat critical of the Caden Wallace pick during the draft. And I think rightfully so, because there's still process stuff that goes on there. But from all accounts, and you were there, so you can add flavor to this once I'm done, he looked like a starting caliber or decent caliber left tackle today, who could execute all the basic stuff and seems to be doing what you'd expect. And if the Patriots found a guy who can be a starting caliber left tackle at that point in the draft, you can just plug in and play, that is a breath of fresh air.
100%. And listen, if they stink this year and there's one of those can't miss left tackle prospects that are out there, they could theoretically still take him and then move Wallace back over to the right side. He can play on the right side. And so if you get him to play left this year and you're happy with it, but he's not, an unbelievable talent there, good player, but he's going to be limited in what he can do. He can play right tackle instead of left, and so I think that would be a kind of a strange situation, but it could happen. And I thought, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just realized that the last time that we were on here talking about this, the offensive line also looked very different. So we might want to actually outline what it looks like right now.
Yeah. So today, just today to start, right? David Andrews was out today. But other than that, the offensive line looked the same as it has the last 2 days before today. So on Saturday and Friday. And that was Caden Wallace at left tackle, Sidy Sow at left guard, Mike Onwenu at right guard, and then Chuks Okorafor at right tackle. They had Calvin Anderson working at – so what they did today is a little bit different than what they've done in previous days. And, of course, Nick Leverett was at center today as opposed to David Andrews. But what they did today, which was different than they had done in other days, was they brought the whole unit out and put a whole nother unit in for the second quarterback. So when Drake Maye went in, he went in with a completely different offensive line, all new skill guys, and then sometimes they rotated. Skill guys kind of rotated in and out depending. But for the most part, it was brand new skill guys, all full brand new offensive line. And so that was interesting. They had Calvin Anderson working as the left tackle on the second unit. And at right tackle on the second unit, they have Vidarian Lowe, which doesn't excite me, but what are you going to do? And so I liked the idea of Calvin Anderson there in that spot. I thought that was good. So we'll see. He looked fine today as well. Lowe struggled at times. But, I don't know. So, and then the third offensive line. So what they did is they had Brissett take all the first team snaps today. They had Drake Maye take all the second team snaps today. And then they rotated third team snaps between Bailey Zappi and Joe Milton. So what they did is that for one drive or one sequence, Milton would be the third quarterback. Then for the next sequence, Zappi would be the third quarter. Everything was the same. It's just they subbed out Zappi and Milton. And so you're not taking any snaps away from Drake Maye. You're not taking any snaps away from Jacoby Brissett. You're just taking snaps away from Bailey Zappi, which doesn't matter. You're going to take snaps away from him anyways. It just is what it is. So, but the third offensive line had Tyrone Wheatley Jr. at left tackle. I think it's Liam Fornadell is his first name. Liam. He was at left guard. Leverett at center. Antonio Maffei at right guard. And then Zuri Henry at right tackle. Maffei was working, I believe, as the on the second unit, Michael Jordan and Layden Robinson with the two guards, with Maffei at center.
Very, very interesting that Charles Turner not getting looks there because he's an undrafted center they brought in.
Yes. So Turner today was rotating in and out with Leverett on that third unit. So he did play a few snaps on that third unit, but Leverett was playing the majority of it. I think as practice went on a little bit more, I think Turner was in there a little bit more. I saw him in there a few times, but it was primarily Leverett that was in there. So,
and then your kind of holes on the step chart right now. Cole Strange at left guard. We don't know where exactly he would slot in, if healthy, and what adjustments they're going to make. I think the other guy is Jake Andrews. The other Andrews, he's not practicing right now, but by all accounts, Antonio Maffei has struggled with snapping the ball. I think I've seen 3 bad snaps already in training camp. I think he has struggled as a blocker anyway. I personally think Jake Andrews would be an upgrade from the limited stuff we have seen from Jake Andrews, but I don't know where they would put him on the line, and I don't
Listen,
know if they're gonna I
Mafi,
don't even know if they put him at center because they played him guard when he played last year.
right. He played center in college, so you would assume
Yeah.
he's going to play center, but we don't know. Mafi was practicing snaps before practice, just like on air, right? They had one guy, and he would snap and then hand punch, and those snaps weren't getting back, directly to the court to the coach that was standing there. Multiple missed snaps and high or to the right or low, and it's just like, dude, you don't even have someone really in your face. You're just working on sticking your hand up afterwards. So, real struggles with him. I can't imagine we're ever going to see Mafi at center. I just don't. I can't ever see that happening. So
that to me feels like, again, I think we talked about this last episode, a guy who's probably not going to make the roster, or them trying to see if he can add a skill that will keep him around.
Exactly.
Well, the other thing is, if Jake, obviously we don't know what's going on with David Andrews, but if he actually, we don't even know if there's an injury, if this is personal. If he misses time, though, your depth chart at center is Nick Leverett as your starter, Antonio Mafi behind him right now with no Jake Andrews, and Charles Turner, who they're not even trusting to get full third team reps right now.
Right.
So that becomes a point of concern. And we talk about, when you look at the preseason, you're just trying to get through a preseason game and play all 4 quarters. You need somebody out there who can snap the ball. So that, I think, is a little story to watch right now as we monitor the David Andrews situation and whatever's going on there. I will say, from all reports, that starting offensive line today, Caden Wallace, Sidiso, Leverett, Onwenu Okorafor looked pretty good. Okorafor had some rough moments pass blocking, but other than that, it was pretty solid. And then that second unit struggled, but I did see that Layden Robinson seemed to do pretty well, at least in the one-on-ones. Could you tell if that was translating to 11-on-11, or is that?
I thought Layden Robinson looked okay. The second unit, in general, Vidarian Lowe was getting smoked all over the place, as he typically does. And then the middle is hard to tell because, you're looking at it saying, well, was that Mafi's problem? Was that Michael Jordan's? We don't know, right? I'm not sure where those guys are coming from. So I think if Robinson were to get some reps with an actual offensive line, that might look a little different. I don't know. It's hard to know. I can tell you Vidarian Lowe looked bad. I thought Calvin Anderson looked okay at left tackle. And, I would look at it. Okorafor looked fine. But I was with my guy, Wes Burho, was there. He's a coach. He coaches the D-line, I believe, in the O-line at Foxborough High. Good guy. Bill was always talking about him in the his players, at least, in meetings. That was a joke because Bill would always make, Foxborough reference. So no, but he was saying the Patriots have a right tackle issue, right? They have a right tackle problem. Okorafor looked okay at times and then really struggled at times. And so if he can't be more consistent, it becomes a thing where now I look at it and say, okay, if you start feeling comfortable with Caden Wallace at left tackle, now you need to start seeing if you can move Calvin Anderson right tackle. Because if Vidarian Lowe is going to be your starting right tackle, we're in trouble. In my opinion, and we talked about this a little bit, or maybe I don't know if it was you that I talked about it with. Maybe it was my dad that I talked about it with instead. But, they've worked Mike Onwenu exclusively at right guard. And I think they've worked Mike Onwenu exclusively at right guard because they already know what he can do at right tackle. They don't need to work him at right tackle, right? If Okorafor can't hang at right tackle, and if Vidarian Lowe doesn't get better, and if Calvin Anderson doesn't hang at right tackle, well, then you could theoretically take Mike Onwenu, move him out to right tackle, and then put Layden Robinson or whomever else, whoever is your next guard up. I would probably think would be Robinson, but who knows, at right guard and leave Onwenu at right tackle, right?
Yep.
Not ideal, but that's something they could do, and they don't need to work him at right tackle in order to do that, even though it's a new scheme, which,
Yeah, well, and I think this kind of becomes the calculus. There's a couple of different mini battles here. You've got the left tackle battle between Caden Wallace and Judon 4, and if Calvin Anderson gets into that discussion, you got that. Then you have, and that's probably going to be your top tackle spot. Then you got your second tackle spot on the right side. And then if nobody's good there, the Onwenu question comes up again. And then the other part of the Onwenu question is also who looks good with the guards and the centers. And because this is one of those where, if David Andrews is healthy, you might feel good about moving Onwenu to right tackle because I think Nick Leffert has looked fine. And you could plug him in at right guard. He's a professional, and you feel like you can handle everything, and it'll be all right. The other part of this is if Layden Robinson starts to show you something, and you feel like he can be plugged in there. But if David Andrews is hurt, and Leverrett's going to be your center, now you're at a point where, all right, which position's depth do you feel more comfortable exposing? And then the flip side is, do you feel like you're getting something from Onwenu at right guard that you can't take off the field? Especially when you hear about the running lanes that they're opening up today. If they think that interior trio is really solid and they like both of the guards the way that they are plugged in there, you might take your chances with rotating at right tackle or trying to pull off an in-season trade if you don't like the other stuff available, because if you can make that stuff work on the inside, that could be the key to your running game. And, you protect the passer on the right side by running the ball well enough that you don't have to worry about it as much. Like, that's kind of your goal there, and you mitigate by running the ball well. A couple different approaches here, and Mayo said that they want to have this figured out by the third preseason game. So this gives you this gives you plenty of time. And I don't think it'll actually take that long. My feeling is that they will know at least their top six by the time you're done with your joint practice with Philly. And once you know who your top six are, at that point, who the actual starting five are there, I'm not sure that's as important. Once you know the six, you're probably early season, you're going to get some rotation. Correct. There's going to be injuries. I think you want that top six figured out, and then you go from there.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to kind of see how that all, shakes out and what guys can do what where. And again, Caden Wallace is good at left tackle. That doesn't mean that he's going to be the starting left tackle. We don't know. It's one day. So maybe tomorrow looks like crap at left tackle, and then we're like, oh boy, let's see. And so I just, I don't know. Obviously, the consistency is important. You want them to practice together as much as you can. And that's one of the reasons why I almost feel like having Onwenu on the inside with So and Andrews just makes it so you leave that core untouched and then figure out the tackles, right? As long as you can get serviceable stuff from them. And Thad mentioned that Donovan Smith is still available. There are guys still available that can play tackle now. Do you want those guys playing left or right tackle for you? Probably not. Those guys don't have jobs for a reason, but they are guys that could potentially come in and do something if you can't get anything from the guys that you have, right? And I just tell you, not be able to get anything from Wheatley, who doesn't look like he can really play, to be honest with you. We'll see. But, and Calvin Anderson, who I was excited about, and Okorafor, who I've heard great things about, and Caden Wallace. There's four guys right there. They should be able to give you two spots. I don't know if they will, but those four guys, I'm hopeful they can give you those two spots, and then we'll see what happens,
And I think to take the long view here for a second, if they do like Caden Wallace at left tackle, we're going to see how much they continue to switch this up in the coming days and weeks.
Right.
But if they settle in and he is a top 20 starting left tackle in the NFL, and you feel like, all right, we got a guy there. Maybe that's something we want to upgrade in the future, but this is something we can win with for now.
Right.
If you take the long view for a second, a couple of the tackles at the top in next year's draft are right tackles. LSU's Will Campbell is a hot name. He's their left tackle. Their right tackle is also a guy who's projected to go in the top half of the first round next year. That is, let me find the name for you here. Emory Jones. That's the right tackle for LSU. Who's a guy who's there. Arizona has a right tackle too, who's supposed to go in the first round next year as of right now. And obviously, Caden Wallace is a guy who's played on the right side before. So if you like him and you think he's good, if you end up picking top 5 next year, you do have the option of just taking whoever you think the best tackle
Correct.
is, period, regardless of side, and swap Caden over to the right side, plug somebody in at left, or
Yeah,
vice versa, or whatever, and
right.
you got options. But yeah, I
Hmm.
think the name to watch right now for New England though is Okorafor, because or
Yeah.
the Okorafor Anderson thing, because you need one of those veterans to give you passable snaps.
Correct. And
Like
again,
you can
yeah,
be the 31st best starting right tackle in the NFL. Just don't be the worst one. But you
right.
can be bad, but be bad by the metrics of like starting caliber, not like just general tackle play. Like
Well, and
get us
that's
up to
yeah,
that plateau.
yeah. I agree with you, and that's kind of what I look at is that can you get us to a place where we're not dying out there, right? And we'll see. And even if it's Caden Wallace doesn't work on the left and has to go to the right, fine. And whether then Anderson or Corafor needs to work on the left, like it doesn't matter. Like get passable play from your two tackles, and then the inside I think is good enough. Even with Nick Leverett there, I really like Nick Leverett. I feel like is going to be the new Ted Karras, where he's going to kind of be a super sub and can sub at both guards and center. He's a guy that like you can see he's animated on the field. The players like him. The coaches seem to like him. The fans already like him. Like he's a guy that I feel pretty comfortable with. If they have to roll with him at center for a little while, if Andrews is out, and again, we have no idea what's going on with David Andrews, but like hopefully it's just a 1-day thing and he's back tomorrow. But if he has to fill in for Andrews or even potentially on Wenu, if those guys get hurt, I don't feel terrible about him on the inside. And so the three guys on the inside, I think, should be okay. It's really just the outside guys. And if we can really get at least passable play from those guys, I think the offensive line could be okay. Not great.
Yeah.
Not going to be the best offensive line in the league or top 10 or anything like that, but they could be okay, which would be a massive step forward from last year.
Do you know have you seen the show Arrested Development?
Yeah, I mean,
There's a great moment on that show with a company they own, which is a train wreck. For those who haven't watched the show, they turn into Jim Cramer in his stock trading show or whatever, and they get upgraded from whatever the absolute worst possible thing is to a don't buy, and everybody is celebrating. That's how the offensive line feels right now. If we could just upgrade this to a don't buy,
right?
From it's like I'll take it. Like
Good point.
that's. I also feel like when you look at the depth chart, like if it's who's young, Wenu who's locked up, you got David Andrews in the middle with Leverett, who's a super sub, and Layden Robinson, who they seem to like. That's 5 interior players on the offensive line. You're probably not keeping more than that.
Right.
Which, again, you go to the Cole Strange question of what does his future look like in New England? I mean, if he were healthy right now, like for everything, if he were healthy right now, I think it would be easy to argue he would not make the roster with the way the depth chart looks.
Yeah.
So that is, I feel bad for the guy, but it's a situation right now where they might have the 5 guys they're going to have for the season locked up, ready to go, and even if Strange gets healthy, there's not necessarily a spot for him there. Now, if he does get healthy and can play well, that's a great bonus for you, and you got some nice depth there. But that's
my breath.
Well, and this is why you invest, and you keep drafting guys in day 2 and day 3, and on the line. This is why you just sign free agents there, and you throw stuff at the wall at the offensive line, because sometimes you get a guy who just doesn't pan out, but you take enough chances, you're going to get somebody who can give you decent level play and fill out your depth chart, and you go from there. The other thing I'll note, and I don't like saying this because I'm a huge fan of David Andrews personally, he has started to look older.
Yeah.
He's not a bad player. Like, he's still a good player, but there were moments last year where you can tell, hey, he's not as quick as he used to be. He's not quite as strong as he used to be. And I just do think it's a little bit notable that David Andrews swaps out for Nick Leverett, and we're not talking about the interior of the offensive line at all. I don't think Leverett's going to be an upgrade on Andrews, but I just do think that's kind of a notable thing that, something to watch for whenever Andrews is back, what his level of play is this year.
That's a good point. It's a good point. One of the things that annoys me about the Jake Andrews pick last year is just like, David Andrews is going to retire at some point, and maybe he hasn't looked the great, but like, why are we drafting a guard? Then we drafted another guard. Then we drafted a third guard, and it was like, what are we doing? Like, why do we keep doing this?
Well, and it was.
And so that was frustrating. And I know they thought about at right tackle, and then of course he played guard instead of right tackle, but it never made any sense. And listen, I argued about the Caden Wallace thing. Caden Wallace played right tackle, and then they were going to try to move him to left tackle. I thought that was crazy, right? But at least the guy's playing tackle. City So played guard in college, and they were going to move him outside in the pros. That's insane. That never happens.
Well, and like the weird thing was, okay, like on paper, it makes sense to say we're going to draft the guy we think is a tackle. We're going to draft the guy we think is a guard. We're going to draft the guy we think is a center. But the City So thing was a reach, I think, to assume that you could develop him as a tackle. And he's turned into what looks like a solid guard. But he's a guard. Antonio Mafe, he is a guard.
Right.
Who now they're playing at center. And then Jake Andrews, obviously he's injured right now. But they have never seemed during this to try to develop him as the next David Andrews, which is weird. Like they're not like James Ferentz was taking snaps from him in training camp last year. Like what
it made no sense.
You got if you think he can be like, especially because you drafted him. If you think he can be a guy for you, actually have to put him out there and give him chances to develop. And when he finally plays, he's at guard. So you draft 3 different guys at 3 different spots on the line. By the end of your first year, they're all playing the same spot for you. And I think that's tough because that's like your evaluations of guys. You're totally missing on what you project these guys to be. And obviously, they were correct that City So can be a good football player. Like they didn't get that part wrong. And Jake Andrews is still a big question mark because he hasn't really played. Mafe, I think, is a miss. But if 2 of those 3 guys are even guys you can roster, you have to feel good about the picks overall because you're taking day 2, day 3 picks, and you're getting guys who make the roster. That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
But the actual process behind the individual picks makes you really start to, question marks.
Well, and listen, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but then it's a question about, who was making the decision, who was making the decisions last year. A lot of the same guys were making the decisions this year as they were last year, but how much say did they really have, right? Bill was the end-all, be-all. He was the guy. He made the decisions. Great. But, how much did the scouts have to say? How much did Elliot Wolf have to say? How much because these guys have been there, right? And so those are the questions that we didn't know.
And how much did the coaches have to say, too? Because I do think it was notable. The guys they picked last year seemed to fit what Adrian Clem had done and the body types he had worked with. Right. And now they're not doing that. Well, I will say, I noted this on a previous podcast, but I'll mention it again here because you weren't on for that one.
Okay.
Brandon Thorne's offensive line almanac came out.
Yes.
And one of the things he noted was that New England has the 5th heaviest offensive line in the NFL.
That's interesting.
You got a team like the Rams up there at 3rd and a couple other teams. Like the Rams are kind of, you think about it and you think about they're on the cutting edge of offense. You think about outside zone and all that stuff. And in your head, you're imagining, nimble guards who can get out and do stuff. But no, this big, beefy offensive line.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to go to a break here in a second, so I'll wrap this up quickly. But we've talked about outside zone being the key part of this year's offense, and I still don't think we have talked enough about how the changeup that the Browns used is going into power concepts last year. When outside zone works and you get defenses flattened out trying to defend it, or you get defenses going lighter, putting more speed out there to try to defend it, you can hit them with power running concepts and bully people off the ball and make it work. And the outside zone seems to be working in practice, but even if it wasn't, the Patriots do have the personnel to do that kind of offensive line stuff with a coach who has been clearly willing to do that stuff. And, I think that these guys know how to run that stuff. Like that wouldn't be an issue. And you're seeing that for some of the trendy offenses, they are going back away from outside zone, back to power concepts. So that balance of what types of concepts they like to use and how they throw their weight around on the offensive line, I think is something to watch this year. And, as the NFL is cyclical in terms of scheme. So the way that this, not just this year, but if you're trying to win in 2026, if that's your timeline, okay, you got to invest in offensive linemen who you feel like when the league has changed in a couple of years can still do what you want to do out there.
Right. I think it's a great point. And we'll see. It's a long way to go, but we'll see. And I will tell you, seeing Caden Wallace and City So on that one play running in space was interesting. You could see that they were athletes, even though they're big guys. you could see that they could move too. And so it's interesting because they have guys that even though they're big, they can get after it. Mike Owen is a big guy, but he can move in space, right? A little bit. He's not like, a track star or anything like that, but he can move. So, we'll see. We haven't even talked about Drake Maye. Didn't even discuss him.
We didn't talk about Barmore. We didn't talk about Judon.
No, Barmore and Judon, I figure we'll get to after. Actually, you know what? We'll do Drake Maye, Barmore, and Judon after the break, and then we'll get you guys out of here. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and do those three things when we come back.
Nothing beats the sights and sounds at Fenway Park when the Sox take on the Yankees. From the smell of good Fenway Frank to the cheers of the crowd, there's no better way to spend a summer evening. And with Game Time, you can make sure you're there. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The Red Sox return to Fenway from the All-Star break in a few weeks to host the Yankees and Mariners, and using the Game Time app, you can quickly find the best value tickets for any game by looking for the blue check mark on the map. And with all-in pricing, the price you see is the price you pay, no hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right. So let's get into Drake Maye. Look, Drake Maye looked bad today. Flat out looked bad. Just from early on in the, throwing the ball into the rectangular bucket. Basically, it's a net, but essentially in the bucket. Yeah. He was inaccurate in that. I don't know if he even got one in the net at all. Hit it right around the net a bunch of times, but I don't know if he actually got it in the net. Might have done it once. And then in team, it was bad. It was real bad. Now, as I said, he was working with the second unit offensive line. Pop Douglas didn't participate in any of the team drills that I saw. He was off kind of running sprints on the other field. I think he's got a little bit of a hamstring tightness that he's worried about, so they're not pushing it right now. So he wasn't out there. He was dealing with a lot of second-string skill guys too, but there were multiple plays where he just threw the ball and where is he throwing it? What's he doing? Where is that ball even going? Who was that to? And it was bad. And so it was very obvious that Jacoby Brissett was and is the better quarterback right now. Doesn't mean he will be, but he was and is the better quarterback right now. The question for me that I have with Maye is how long is it going to take him to get to that point, and will he? I remember when Mac Jones, the first padded practice of Mac Jones' career, I walked out of that saying, geez, this kid's not ready. He's got no shot. And then over the next week, he proved us wrong, and then of course, went downhill from there. But that first training camp was impressive. After that, so we'll see with Maye. A long way to go.
Yeah, well, I think it's first of all, growth is not linear in the NFL. You're going to have ups and downs, especially with young players like Maye. Not shocked. The biggest issue for him, it's his accuracy, I think, and it's kind of a twofold thing. Sometimes it seems to be footwork. Sometimes it seems to be just him.
Right.
And it seems like there are days for him where his accuracy, his touch just isn't quite there, even if the footwork's there. And you throw in a day like today, it's raining, the ball's slippery, your first time with pads, full speed. It's very easy to slip out of any of the habits you're trying to build with your footwork.
True.
And that can lead to stuff. For everything I heard, he got a little bit unlucky with some of the plays today too. Drops and
the interception he had was not his fault. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a perfect throw to Mitchell Wilcox, I think is who he threw it to. But it was in Wilcox's hands. Duggar tipped it out of his hands. Mitchell fell down, and Duggar picked it off. And it was just kind of it wasn't the best pass, but shouldn't have been picked off,
Yeah. Well, the one consistent accuracy issue you see on tape with Maye is that he throws behind guys when they're moving horizontally.
Yeah.
And through all of camp so far, you just watch the videos. Every once in a while, you'll see receivers doing drills, and you had to reach behind him a little, or you had to slow down a little bit for that football. And then the camera cuts over to the quarterback who's throwing it. Oh, it was Maye who was throwing it,
Right.
and it seemed like you saw that today, and that was also happening in live action. Which, from what I saw of that pick, it was a ball thrown slightly behind. Tight end gets his hands on the ball. DB is involved in the play where you could have thrown it further away from him. And that's where you get into trouble. It's not a play that always ends in a pick, but it's increased danger of something
100%.
happening. And
Yeah.
that's where he needs to improve. It could be one bad day, and tomorrow everything's fixed, and he's hitting things in time, and we're all good. This could be something we were watching in year 1 and year 2, into year 3, and I think this is probably the big thing to watch with him, other than the mental stuff, is how accurate he can be. I will say though, he gets the Josh Allen comparison. I brought up just PFF's adjusted completion percentage metric. It's pretty good. It gives you an idea of how often guys are throwing the ball on target. Josh Allen's rookie season, he was 64.7%, which is very low.
Yeah.
Like, you think about completion percentages in the NFL, you're trying to be high 60s. This is 64.7 before you're counting for drops and tips and all that kind of stuff that's going to factor in.
It's real bad.
But it goes up to 70.6 his second year, 78.7 by his third year, and it has been 74 or above ever since.
That's
what you're looking for from Maye, is to make that kind of leap. And the thing that's tough is that anything that's mechanical here, you're not fixing it now. It's like, how those days where you get out to the golf course and it's the second hole and you're having a bad day with your swing, but you can't. So
you got what it is.
You got to finish the whole 18 with that swing and try to make it work. That's where you are at this point. Like, guys will start making these adjustments year 2, year 3 in the offseason. Like, this is the kind of work you do next March, where you go out to a QB coach and you work with him for a month and try to work on things. Like, that's when that stuff takes place. So the accuracy is concerning. You want to see it be better. I don't expect it to be fixed this year. I think that's a year 2, year 3 thing.
Right. Well, and the other part, look, here's the Josh Allen comparison in it. I can't remember. So I was at practice with my dad and Wes today. And I think my dad said, I don't remember if it was me or him. It doesn't matter. Josh Allen, you want to be Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen is going to make 3, maybe 2 or 3 just absolutely stupid plays over the course of a game. Just like, what the hell were you thinking when you did that? But the rest of the game is going to be incredible. And so you live with those bad plays because of what you get on the high end. Mm-hmm. I don't want to lose that with Drake Maye. I don't want to neuter him to the point where you're saying, listen, you can't make mistakes and you got to be more accurate. You got to be thinking about I want him to be more accurate. I want him to work on all those things and I want him to fix, but I also want him to be him, because when he is that guy and he lets go and plays football, he's a monster. He's got a great arm. He's got a good feel for the game. He makes plays. And so I want him to keep doing that. But of course, we need to, he has to work his butt off, which is what Josh Allen did. And then B, we have to put him in a system that's going to help him do that. And then C, we have to surround him with talent, which you saw that number go up when Stephon Diggs came to town. And, when they put those pieces around him to make him more successful. And so hopefully Javon Baker, who looked really good today in camp, hopefully Jalen Polk, who has looked good at times, he looked fine today, but nothing special. But hopefully those guys continue to grow. And you're looking at this saying, if we can they've drafted 5 receivers in the last 3 years. Okay. A few in the second round. Baker was in the 4th, and then, of course, 2 in the 6th last year. If 2 or 3 of those guys can genuinely hit, not be serviceable, be actually good receivers, you're doing all right here, right? And so I don't know who that other guy is. I feel like Pop Douglas should be okay. If one of those other guys can be actually successful, that could be huge. And so we'll see.
Going back to Maye for a second, I'm just going to use a cross-sport analogy I was thinking about here. Maye is like that young September call-up in baseball who gets at-bats because when he makes good contact, it's either a home run or if he gets on the base paths, he's a threat to steal. Like, he's really good once he's out there.
Right.
But he's going to hit like 190 with a ton of strikeouts.
Yep.
And you're just giving him the at-bats because he's dangerous. And then you hope that, with development, the average comes up. And with that, you're getting the home runs more and you're getting less of the bad plays. That's what Maye is right now. And part of that is that when you're at that point in your developmental stage, you're going to have days in practice where there's just no home runs and it's all strikeouts because you're still young and you're learning. And that's kind of what today felt like,
Right.
You got like one single, a bunch of strikeouts. Like that's that kind of day. So yeah, the receivers. Now we have seen Baker with a highlight reel grab, Tyquan Thornton, buff Tyquan with the pads on, still making plays, which is awesome to see.
Yeah.
Jalen Polk getting rave reviews. A lot of people say he just kind of moves differently out there. Like, he's noticeable, which is awesome. And I think you look at the depth chart right now, as far as I can tell, your top X receiver is Tyquan, with, it seemed like today, Javon Baker behind him. Look at the two of those guys were filling that role.
Yeah.
And then Osborne is kind of your flanker, with Kendrick Bourne going to jump in on that when he's healthy. And then Pop Douglas in the slot with Jalen Polk there.
It's pretty solid.
That could be your six. I don't know how Juju Smith-Schuster makes this roster right now. Jalen Reagor and
I feel the same way about Jalen Reagor, man.
Reagor and Booty are in a really interesting position here because, Tyquan isn't a lock right now because he hasn't done it in real games.
Of course.
Yet. Yeah. And KJ Osborne still can be played out of where he is, and we don't know when Bourne's going to be healthy. I do think it's also worth noting that they have had Jalen Polk involved in the kickoff game, which that is big red flag around Jalen Reagor, because if Polk gives you something there, then that was one of Rager's big things, that he can help you on kickoffs. And if they like Marcus Jones and Jalen Polk on kickoffs and they're happy with that, so that's a lot harder for Reagor to make this roster.
Yeah. All right. That's going to be a battle that is going to be really interesting to see, because the bottom of that depth chart, there's just so much that we just don't know. And Jalen Reagor, good player as a return guy, but like in this iteration of the return, what does that look like, right? Do we need a guy with that straight line speed? I don't think so. He's not exactly a wiggle guy. And so to me, it's going to be that Marcus Jones type player. And maybe they like Jalen Polk's ability to do that. Maybe they like JaMychal Hasty's ability to do that. I don't know, right? I mean, who the heck knows what's going to happen? And it's one of those things. And I'll tell you, I said it to Matt. I talked to Matt today after practice. They were practicing that just a little bit today. It was jarring for me to see how far away the kickoff team is from the actual ball. They can't start moving until either the ball hits the ground or the guy catches the ball. They're at the 35-yard line. So, it's the 35 and the 40, right? It's the 35. The return team's at the 35, and the kicking game. So they're coming from the 40-yard line, and they can't start moving until the guy already has the ball. So now they got to try to go get him. I mean, and listen, even if you beat your block, that's fine. He's receiving the ball probably before the goal line, so maybe at the 10-ish yard line or so. He's going to get 10 yards easy if he breaks one tackle. Now, so I think just to start off the year, I might just be kicking the ball straight out of bounds. Just kick it out of bounds and go ahead, take the ball to the 30-yard line. Or not out of bounds, but out of the end zone. Kick the ball to the end zone, take the ball to 30. We don't care, and I'm not going to deal with it. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't be surprised to see multiple kick return touchdowns opening weekend. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And so I'm not even messing with that at all. I'm just kicking it out of the back of the end zone.
I think the first month of this season, you will see one major upset in the NFL because of a special teams play on the new kickoff. Like that when Sean came on, Sean Syed, he talked about how one thing that teams have done is you get your 10 coverage players, and they will send like 7 rushing after the kick returner, and they'll have 3 kind of stay back a little bit to
Right,
set
just in
up
case.
almost like your defensive line and linebackers when you're trying to stop the run, setting up a 2-level approach so you can play off of blockers and make sure if somebody breaks a tackle, you have somebody behind them to make a play.
Which is fine, but then that puts the line of scrimmage at like the 40, which is not ideal.
Yeah, well, and we'll see how the Patriots handle. Like the whole thing is going to be interesting because we've only seen this in the XFL with lower level athletes,
Right?
And the Patriots still aren't. It seems like they aren't fully practicing it. It seems like they're waiting on more rules clarification before they really get into it.
They practiced today. They practiced the return.
Yeah,
but the scout team guys were on the kickoff team, so they were practicing the return more than they were practicing the actual kickoff.
Yeah.
So we'll see kind of how that goes. But it just it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how that plays out. But anyways, that's a different conversation for a different day. We talked about Drake Maye. Let's get into Christian Barmore. Thad asked an important question, which is, if he can't play, who fills in for him? I honestly, I don't think we even answered that today. I think it's a good question. It's a pertinent question. It's a question that we have that I honestly don't know what the answer to is right now. But I'm going to hold off on answering that right now, only because I think, number one, I have no idea what the situation is. Gerard Mayo said there's no timetable for his return. They're obviously holding out hope for him. They're thinking about him. He's not in the hospital. Matter of fact, I saw him in practice on Friday. And so, he's not in the hospital right now. So they think that it may not be, maybe it's not quite as bad as David Andrews was a few years back. But we have no idea. We have no way of knowing that. And so let's wait for a little bit more information. And let's honestly, I don't even want to touch it right now because I don't want to take away from the fact that, here's a guy that like genuinely could have died if they hadn't figured that out. And
blood clots
still really could have a real issue. And so we will get to the football side of it. I'd like to wait a little bit just to kind of see how long it's going to take to figure out how long he's going to be out for and so on and so forth. But that is it's a very real question the Patriots are going to start answering. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Drew Rosenhaus was in Foxborough today. Probably talking about Devon Godchaux's contract. Yeah.
Well, and obviously that's a big thing. I will say just on the Barmore stuff, like blood clots are scary. Like they're going to, like, he posted up on Instagram that he'll be back soon, which gives me optimism. This is scary because it can be deadly if you don't catch it fast enough, or it can be career ending depending on what is causing the blood clotting. And in some people, it just happens and you have to be on blood thinners, and that's pretty much a career ender. You can't really play in the NFL if you're on blood thinners.
Right.
And this is the other thing for Barmore is that, the fact that he said I'll be back soon, maybe it's just him trying to be optimistic. Maybe there was optimism there because they've already identified whatever it is that's causing this. If that's the case, you could be back this season.
Right.
Depending on how long treatment lasts, but there's a scenario here where he is missing the full season, and you got to be prepared for that. Like there's a scenario where he's completely, they have already handled everything appropriately, and he's already out of the woods when it comes to his own safety, and all of that is taken care of. He's already on the path to recovery. All of that can be true, and he still might not play this season because of how long these things can take to figure out. And the big thing is, while you figure it out, you're on blood thinners. You can't be taking hits.
That is
from
correct.
Big padded people when you're on blood thinners. I did see that I have seen return times of like 3 months from this. Like in history, 3 months from now puts you at the end of October. So hypothetically, if that's what we're looking at, he would be, starting to come back in the middle of the season. So there's that timetable without knowing real details. The thing runs the full gamut. They could have figured it out. He's going to be back before the season starts. It could be middle of the season. It could be next season.
And so that's it. It's just and by the way, Thad, I know it wasn't a malicious comment from you. It's not something and I think it's a very real and warranted question, right? And something that the Patriots are going to have to figure out, right? Because if he isn't there for the start of the season, they have to find someone to play the middle, right? And they're never going to find someone that can do it at the level that Barmore can do it at.
No,
but can you throw in some guys that can be competent in there and and give you some play? And we'll get into that, I'm sure, as kind of the weeks go by and we get a little bit of a medical update from him. But like I said, right now, beyond just saying we wish him well and hopefully it's not too long, I don't want to get into that whole conversation just yet, because again, like you said, Matt, it might be a moot point and he's back before the season starts.
Yeah, I will also say to segue to the related subject here of Godchaux and his contract, this puts a little bit of urgency, I think, behind figuring out that situation, because I think if you go into this season and you're down both of your starting defensive tackles, that is a really tough place to be. If they can't resolve Godchaux and he ends up off the team, and if Barmore isn't playing, I liked the depth of the defensive tackle room when it comes to like having versatile players and guys who can be role players for you. I don't like the depth of the defensive tackle room when it comes to guys who could be a full-time nose tackle for you against the run, or for guys who can be playing 60 snaps a game for you on defense. They don't have that kind of guys unless somebody really steps up and develops here. I'll just read off the names. Like, we don't really, like you said, we're not going to have actual answers for who's going to be doing what, but they got Sam Roberts, Jeremiah Farms in there, two guys who have been around as undrafted free agents. Daniel Aquale's in there. He's been good as a pass rusher. They signed Armin Watts in free agency. And Tristan Hill is a guy who was on the practice squad last year, who got some run at the end of the season, who has kind of bounced around the league a little bit. So those are the names behind your starting pair at defensive tackle.
Not great.
Good role players there. But I think you kind of have to give Godchaux whatever he wants right now. Unless they have good information knowing that Barmore will be back this season, I think you just have to give Godchaux whatever he wants and put him on the field, because otherwise, your defense is going to be in a really rough shape.
I would agree. And I would love, by the way, Thad thinks we should bribe JJ to come out of retirement. I'm in. No, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. The last thing we should hit on is Matthew Judon. I do want to hit on James mentioned, Dark Blue Gold mentions about women's and men's rugby. Just super quick, if you haven't seen it, the women's USA just absolutely just murders people. But there's a woman named Alona Maher, I think her last name is, and she is an absolute, just a monster. She is like, her clips on Twitter are outrageous. She's just throwing people left and right, blowing by everyone and scoring. It's fantastic. And so I don't really understand all the rules of rugby, but rugby is a lot of fun to watch. And I know Wes is a big New England Free Jacks guy. The Free Jacks play at North Quincy High School, I believe. And so they are, I think, in the championship for their league. But anyways, But yes, a good call by James over there about rugby.
Yeah, I will also add Thad as asking about Lawrence Guy. Lawrence Guy is still a free agent right now.
Yeah, sure.
Which I think regardless of the Godchaux situation, if Barmore is out for any kind of significant time, you've got to think about bringing Guy back in.
I would agree.
Even if he's not what he has been, I think unless you get something from these rotational guys in the preseason that you weren't expecting, Guy is somebody, if he's in football shape still and still trying to play, who can be an asset for you and at least play 50% of your snaps, give you quality run defense, and help out everybody around you.
Yeah. So I think it's a good idea. He's a guy that's familiar with the place. Obviously was a well-liked person here. So but
and they only caught him because they're trying to get younger at the position, which I think becomes less of a concern if you're missing somebody and you're just trying to backfill with guys who can.
And I'm sure he's been here long enough. I'm sure that he would be okay to come back. Hasn't signed anywhere else either, so I'm sure he would be down to come back if the price is right. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I'm interested in that. All right, last thing is Matthew Judon. Matthew Judon left practice today. Was out here not practicing, watching on the sideline. Was he hurt? Was he not? We don't know. Kind of seemed like he wasn't hurt, though. I'll tell you that much. He was sitting off to the side on like bags and stuff. It was just it was strange to me what was happening with him. Mayo got into it or Mayo went over to him. They seemed to have a little bit of a maybe not a heated conversation, but an animated conversation. He had an animated conversation with Elliot Wolf as well, and then he was gone. And so
he seemed to go on a podcast later on the day too.
Yes,
I don't know if that was later. I don't know if that was today or if that was.
Yeah,
earlier.
I don't know if that was today or they released it today. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know if the full episode's out, but there was a segment released where he talked about how he apparently drafted his own contract extension offer, and the Patriots did not reply to it, which I thought was interesting.
Right.
But yeah, well, the full sequence, especially when you bring in the context of what he has said previously, was essentially, I'm not happy on my contract, but I signed it, so I'm going to be here and I'm going to play, but I love being here and I want to be here and I want more money and I want to be here for a while. That kind of goes out the window when on the first pad practice you show up and you're not practicing, getting into it with the coach. And, the sequence where he decides to kind of just lounge on the side while everybody's doing stretches and drills and everything. And then you get into it with the coach and you leave. And then you come back out with your phone and you're talking to the GM and front office people. And then you storm off again. That's not great because, if this was Bill Belichick's team, you feel a lot better about the whole thing because if that whole sequence happens and Bill Belichick is your head coach, if Belichick still gives you money and extension and gives you what you want after that, he still has credibility in the locker room.
Right.
The tough part for the Patriots is I think it's hard to keep Matthew Judon right now because this is a guy who's supposed to be a veteran and a team leader, and he's asking for more money on the basis of being that, not just what he does on the field. And to act like that on the first day of pad practices and kind of show up a new head coach in a new front office, it's hard. It's hard to keep a guy like that around. It's hard to justify to the other 89 guys in the building why you just gave him more money after that happens from a locker room perspective. And, it's obviously we don't know all the details of the negotiations. So it's hard to comment on exactly what Matthew Judon wants, what he isn't getting, what the Patriots won't give him. But I think it's this completely changes the dynamic right here. And I think this kind of becomes your first test for the new front office. I think you have to nip this in the bud. Whether it's resolving it by keeping him here, finding an amicable agreement that keeps him in the building. Because, again, I don't think you do what you did today if you aren't at least somewhat interested in being in the building. You do that in part because you care and you want to be out there and you're looking for attention or whatever.
Right.
Or by shipping him off, cutting him, trading him, whatever it is. This can't be a multi-day thing. And whether it's tomorrow you tell him, we will negotiate with you, but we won't even start negotiations until you start showing up and practicing. If that's how it is too, you can't. You can't have this stuff. You just can't have it.
You got to figure it out, and it's got to be soon. You got to figure it out soon. And so, and look, I want him around. I was actually the first one today to catch a pass from Matthew Judon. Threw him back perfect spiral, of course, obviously. Come on. But it's the interaction with the fans. It's the fact that he's around. It's the fact that he's doing those, that stuff is important. That makes a difference. It matters, and I think that's one of those things. But as James pointed out, unnecessary distraction. He cannot be a distraction. And as soon as he starts to become a real distraction, he's got to go. Or you got to really figure it out, right? And if he's going to really be that much of a distraction because he's not happy, then that to me is a guy I don't want around anyways, And so I think the leadership part of it is huge for me. That's not what I want my young guys seeing, right? Oh, if you act like an asshole at practice, you'll get paid, right? That's not the case, right? And I think, I think he needs a little bit of a reality check too, because I don't know what's going to take to keep him. But you can't sit there and tell me that Matthew Judon deserves to be paid like a top 5 to 10 defensive end in the league. He's not that guy. He just simply isn't that guy. Maybe he was at one point. He isn't that guy now.
Especially his age coming off an injury.
Right. And maybe he can prove that he is that guy again. And so fine. But if he wants to bet on himself, if he wants to bet on himself this year and say, hey, look, give me a 1-year deal, give me $14 million a day, give me $14 million a year, and we're good to go. And I'll bet on myself this year, and then you're gonna have to pay me a ton of money next year, or I'm gonna go somewhere else. Fine. I don't think that's what he wants to do. I think he wants guaranteed money up front. And if you want that, you have to understand that we're not paying you at the top of the market anymore because that's not who you are anymore.
Well, I think you got to practice too. Like the big concern is what he looks like now after the injury.
Right.
I don't think you can blame the Patriots, if this is the hang up, for not wanting to give out multiple years of guaranteed money to a guy who they have not seen play padded football since early October last year with that injury. So, yeah, it's tough. And I also think, if you want to hold in and you would like more money and you want to do that, then do that.
Right.
But don't come out here playing with the fans and doing all that stuff, because that's how you create this friction.
Correct.
Then you're basically, if you're going in front of the GM and in front of the coach saying, hey, I'll do the fun stuff, I'll play with the fans, I'll do the easy stuff that we can do and all that and make everybody love me, and then turn around and not practice when you already said, I'm not going to be a distraction about this. That is the definition of being a distraction about this.
100%.
And that's how you force somebody's hand, and you can turn non-hostile negotiations into hostile negotiations very, very quickly that way. This is you don't want this to get uglier than it is. It's a tough situation for a new-ish front office. I hope by the time we're doing a show next Thursday night, it better be wrapped up by then.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And Tony points out, and look, Tony Wright points out, everyone and their mother's getting paid, right in front of him. He's right. Like, everyone and their mother is getting paid right in front of him. But those people aren't coming off the injuries that he's had multiple years in a row. And they're a lot younger than he is. And that matters. That stuff matters. Yeah. And, not only that, but also he's already gotten that big contract, right? That big contract he got was when he came to the Patriots, right? Was the big contract that all those guys are getting now for the first time. And so they're not giving out a big second contract to someone. They're giving out their first big contract to someone, right? So I think that makes a difference as well.
No.
But,
I don't.
If you want to do some incentive-laden thing and give them, hey, listen, if you reach this and you're this level and blah, blah, fine. I got no problem with that, right? Even if you want to give them the right to negotiate next year, depending on what happens. I again, no problem with that as well. But you can't sit there and tell me he deserves $16, $17, $18 million a year. He simply doesn't.
Yeah, and beyond that, you simply cannot poison the negotiations by doing this stuff in practice.
Correct.
You want to hold in. That's, I think,
right.
That's a situation that can be handled.
Yeah.
If you're saying, hey, I'll practice, I'm not doing all the padded stuff until we figure out what the contract is this year because I don't want to get hurt doing stuff with no guarantees. I think that's totally understandable and something that can be worked out. But the second you're out there, not being an example for your teammates and making the coach get into it with you on the sideline is when the stuff gets so much more difficult than it needs to be. If he went out there and did the fun stuff with the fans, and then he's like, hey, and he lets everybody know I'm not going to practice, but you go out and you're, hyping up your teammates and basically being a coach to them out there and being a leader that way still, showing you're engaged, you're with the team, you can negotiate. Everything can work. And if the coach says, hey, if you're not going to practice, then leave. We don't want to hold in. I think you have to, respect that. Like it's his call. It's a new head coach. You have to understand that if you're testing his authority, things might not go your way on that. And now we're here where it's just all, as James says in the chat, posturing. And it makes it's ugly for everybody involved. And I also think, if he's going to be traded, I assume he's going to be looking for a new contract somewhere else too. And I think this makes that harder. Like he's made a situation where he's more likely to be traded, which means the Patriots are less likely to get something valuable back, which means Patriots are then less likely to trade him because they're not getting the return, which poisons the well. And
it's a whole mess. It's just a mess.
I'm a huge fan of Judon. A great football player. This has not been an issue until the last 24 hours. So
Right.
hopefully it's just him being frustrated that this didn't happen before the pads came on.
Yeah.
They can settle him down, have a come to Jesus moment, get it all ironed out in the next 48 hours, and we can forget about it and go play football. But
I don't
that's
know.
not necessarily how it's going to go.
Right. So that's the thing. So we got to figure that out. They got a lot to figure out over the next week or so. There's football this Thursday night. This Thursday is football, which is pretty wild, like an actual game. It's preseason.
I mean, not an actual game, but it is the kind of game you throw on and you go, oh, football back of 5 minutes. You're like, oh man,
it's a televised game. One that we're like, oh, we can't wait for this, and then it happens, and we're like, oh god, why are we watching this? But nevertheless, it is a game.
Texans Bears. I'm looking at this Texans depth chart right now, just trying to see if there's anybody, who you might see in this game.
So it's like Patriots South.
Dalton Keene is on the Texans, so you might get get a little of him.
Sighting. That's a perfect day for Dalton Keene to play if he's healthy, which I doubt he is. But
he's down the depth chart. Let's see if there's any other names on here that at least at the D'Angelo Ross. Was he in New England?
Yeah, he was.
Sounds familiar. Yeah,
corner, right?
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yep.
He's down there. I mean, Miles Bryant's in Houston. I don't know how much he's going to play. He might play a drive or two for them.
Maybe.
Yeah. For the uniform nerds out there, so the first time we see the Texans' new uniforms in an actual game as they take on the Bears in the Hall of Fame game Thursday night. If anybody's interested in that,
didn't even know they had it.
Yeah. So do we want to pick up some leftovers to practice too? Anything else? I saw Kevin Harris apparently looks pretty good today.
Yeah. You know what? Here's the one thing for me that I will point out, and it's just more of a general theme than it is anything else. They're spending a lot of time teaching. They're going slow, right? And I think that that's important, right? They had like a whole 5-minute team session where they were just working on ball security. For like 5 minutes, they were on the far field, and there were two guys slapping, trying to get the ball out of the guy's hand. And they were rotating who was holding the ball and who wasn't. It wasn't just offensive guys at the ball. Defensive guys at the ball. Defensive guys were going after it. Offensive guys went. It was great. Those are the types of things that you like to see. Like, they are very focused on teaching. There are times when they're going slow in drills, and they're going slow in drills because they're trying to show them the right way to do it. And I think that just matters to me. And I'm happy to see that. We'll see how that translates to gameplay and everything else. But I like the way that they're doing that, and they're taking their time with it. One of the things that, and it's, of course, it's very, very different, right? But we have an orientation program at our school, and we went to this big training for it. And the first thing they said at the training was go slow to go fast. You start off by teaching everything, and you slowly teach everything so that everyone understands it. And then once they understand it, you don't have to go over it again. They already know it. It's already been taught. So you go slow at the beginning so that you can go fast at the end. And I think that, that is hopefully where the Patriots are headed with this. And I was just happy to see that. So,
yeah, no, that's a good point. Another thing, a couple front seven things.
mm-hmm.
Sione Takitaki still not practicing. Marty Mapu also not practicing right now, which I do not love. That's a guy who needs to get as many reps as he possibly can.
Yep.
Which I will note, I think Evan Lazar, I think it was Catch 22, might have been, actually I think it was the live show during practice the other day, kind of mentioned that Marty Mapu is one of those guys who, we're not really talking about it right now, but if he at some point ended up as a not cap casualty, just didn't make the roster this year or next year, wouldn't be super shocking. Different front office that drafted him.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a little banged up. Might not be finding a role.
Right.
So that's a situation to monitor. We talked about defensive tackle earlier. Patriots signed, forgetting the first name, Bronson is his last name, as a depth defensive tackle. They brought him in, probably just to have another body there. O'Shane Ziminis?
Ziminis. I believe it's Ziminis, I think.
Yeah. Looked awesome from what I heard. You were there, so I'll let you take this away. I heard he looked pretty good as an edge rusher.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he looked good too. So, And I mean, who knows, right? But there was a player or two where he was in the backfield like real quick.
I think he's making, and he's a good special teamer. I think he's making this roster.
I would think so too.
Yeah.
So I initially had him on my initial 53-man roster, which came out of Pat's pulpit last Monday. And then I took him off because I had forgotten to put Keon White on there. So I was like, I don't know, just take Zamani's off. I don't know. What the hell was I doing? But no, I mean, I think that I wouldn't call him a lock necessarily to make the roster, but if Taki can't get healthy, and that's the other part of it is that if one of these guys ends up on the PUP list, that opens up another roster spot, right? One of the guys that you thought might be on there, even if it's a Christian Barmore. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. A couple other notes in here. Antonio Gibson, running back. He's practicing now. He's good to go.
Yep.
Looked good from everything I heard.
All over the field. Guys everywhere. Plays in the backfield, plays outside, plays inside, plays everywhere. So he's going to be a fun chess piece to watch.
Yeah, excited for him. On the injury front, Jabril Peppers left during practice today. He got injured early, left, came back. It was during drills, I think, and left again. So that'll be something to monitor.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something that I had missed when I was out there, to be honest with you, but certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and then Joshua Uche kicked out of practice. Kind of provide some color for what happened there.
You know what? I mean, I didn't see exactly what happened, but I did see it looked like he had a free rush at the quarterback, and then all of a sudden he didn't. A core force stepped in and just lit him up like pretty good. And my assumption is that a core force said something to him along the lines of, "You're not getting by me," or what you thought you had a free shot at the quarterback, or whatever, something.
Probably with an expletive in there.
Oh yeah, I would imagine it was a little more colorful than the way I said it. And then Uche was not pleased. Got into it with him. They were yelling back and forth, but he had a core 4 by the face mask, and so they booted him. They just said, "See you later," and so he just jogged up the field right after that, and a core 4 stayed in, and so that was interesting. There was one, I mean, and whatever, tempers flare. It's what is what it is. I'm not too worried about that.
And then
there was one sequence where Javon Baker ran back, and Javon Baker, man, reminds me of my dad brought it up too, but I always heard the stories because I never watched them. But he always said stories of Russ Francis, and Russ Francis would catch the ball if 6 guys are draped all over him, but if he's all by himself, he'd drop it. Javon Baker just like comeback route, easy comeback route, right in his hands, and just dropped it. And he just like, what the hell, dude? And Maye was like, let's go. The whole team the whole offense ran like a lap. Not even really a lap, just like kind of the end and then around the goalpost and back. And then he circled up the offense and talked to them for a minute or two. Not long, just maybe 30 seconds to a minute. But wasn't pleased about that. And that's one of those things where, like, that's why Baker gets drafted where he gets drafted, because, he's an explosive playmaker and he makes these crazy plays, but he's just not a consistent and reliable wide receiver, or hasn't been a consistent and reliable wide receiver in those easy moments. And so he's got to get out of that, because you can't have him on the field just for those highlight reel catches, because, at a certain point, it's like, yeah, that's great. He can make those catches, but it's the NFL. It's a lot harder to make those catches in the NFL than it is in college.
Which is why I made the Kendrick Bourne comparison when they picked him as a guy who, we've seen Bourne make all kinds of highlight reel plays in New England.
Right.
And then he'll also have a couple plays that were just like, man, what were you doing there?
Right.
And I think there's some similarities there. Something to watch. There was a question in the chat. I was going to bring this up anyway about the kickers. From everything I have seen, Chad Ryland has outkicked Joey Sly so far. Neither has been perfect, but I saw that Ryland is 7 of 8 and Sly is 6 of 8 in the field goals they've done in camp. Obviously not that many. And Ryland struggled in minicamp, but now that they're out here, he seems to look a lot better. And if he can be even, replacement level NFL kicker for you this year, I think you got to feel good about.
I would agree with you. There was 0 kicking today. Friday they kicked. I think Ryland went 4 for 4 and Sly went 3 for 4. Sly's kicks were very low, which I was surprised about. So they both had good distance, but Sly's came out I think if the Patriots were really trying to rush and got a guy or two to get their hands up, and they probably could have blocked one or even two of his 4 attempts. And so that's not something you're really looking to see from your kicker. So I know Riley Patterson got released today by the Jags. I think he's still playing for the Jags. I don't know who he's playing for.
He was in New England on the practice squad briefly
Yeah,
before in like
and so
2021.
theoretically, he could be a guy that they could bring in if they don't like what they're getting from Sly. But I would think it's going to be between Sly and Ryland, and like you said, Ryland seems to be winning out right now. Now the big issue is with Ryland is right up here, his head. If he can get his head on straight, I think that he can be a decent kicker. I just don't know if that's the case.
It's not a talent question with him. We've all seen his leg. It's the consistency. So fingers crossed he can figure it out. Because if he figures it out, I think he can be a very high level kicker in this league. Like he has the ability to do it. He can kick in cold weather too. That's something we've seen him do in college. So one other Patriots note, and then I want to touch on something from around the NFL if we have a second after this.
Yeah,
but just from what I heard, a lot of false starts today.
A few of them. Yep.
Yeah. To be expected, but I think that's something that's like, first time play caller, offensive coordinator, young guys on staff. Not super shocking, but you want to see that cleaned up because this offense is not good enough to have a lot of penalties and expect to succeed out there.
Yep.
All right, my non-Patriots thing, because this happened since we did our show last week.
All right.
Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, 2 huge contracts. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this.
It's insane. The Tua thing is insane. It's completely insane to me. Look, I get it. You got to pay him. The reason you have to pay him is because you're in the situation that you're in. You have these guys. You have Tyreek Hill. You have Jalen Waddle. You have 4 super fast running backs. Like, you're there. You have these guys already. But it's Tua. Tua's not that good. And so he's not bad. He's not $53 million good. No. And that's the issue that I have with him, is that he's just not that good. And again, if he can get carried by his weapons, great. They're not going to be in a position to get a quarterback that is even halfway as good as Tua is right now in the draft next year. There's not going to be anyone available in free agency unless you think Gardner Minshew can do that, right? Like, so I understand why they did it. It's so much money. It's so much money. And that's a problem for me. So
this is the Miami Dolphins, as of right now, the end of July 2024, for the 2025 season, are currently over $71 million over the cap.
Right.
And that's this number might change because I don't know if the Tua cap hit is actually accurate yet, if they have all the information on that. But you've got Tua, who, that cap hit is going to be what it's going to be next season. You're not changing that. Tyreek Hill is your next biggest cap hit. He's going to be 31 years old. Then you've got Bradley Chubb, who we've yet to see how he looks after, he's going to tear his Achilles, if I'm remembering correctly, or ACL or whatever, but he's had injuries. He's going to have a cap hit of almost $30 million. He'll be 29. You got Jalen Ramsey, who's going to be 31. Teron Armstead, who's going to be 34.
Yeah.
Those are your top 5 guys.
Right.
And you look through the other guys that, they don't even have a lot of contracts here where you say, hey, we can cut this guy and save money, or even we feel comfortable extending and prorating. You gotta, do you want to give a 31-year-old Tyreek Hill a big time extension and try to push money out into the future? Do you want to do that with a 34-year-old Teron Armstead?
Seems nuts to me. I see the vision. I get it. I understand. They're trying to win a championship. I totally get it. But, I don't think they're good enough. The other part of it for me is that they have to get the number 1 seed. They have to. They have to win and get the number 1 seed because they cannot. That team is not built to go on the road. They can't do it. They just simply can't go on the road in bad conditions. They have to be at home or in a dome. And so the only chance they have is to get that number 1 seed. And if they can get that number 1 seed, then everyone's going to go down to Miami, right? Kansas City going into Miami in January, there's a chance they could beat them. I don't think they're going to, but there's a chance they could beat them. Buffalo having to go into Miami in January, I could see there's a chance. If you're telling me Miami's got to go into Buffalo or Kansas City and win, no chance. There's no chance. They went into Miami and got embarrassed last year. And that's going to happen again if they don't get the number 1 seed.
Well, I think even beyond all of this is that, let's say, they do end up going on the road in the playoffs or whatever, or at home, wherever they are. You're going to tell me that by January, Teron Armstead's still going to be healthy and Isaiah Wynn's still going to be healthy, and you're going to feel good about your offensive line. And they're they're relying, the entire team is built to play these fast, high octane games. And when they play that way, they can put up 70 points on you. They will blow out teams this year. They 100% will.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is that they will also get blown out. They are, built to play one way, and when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't, which is not how you win in the playoffs.
Right.
Because that's where you get more of these, designer schemes that are dedicated to beat exactly what it is you do well. And, that Rams offense back in the day, the greatest show on turf Rams offense was electric. And then you get into the playoffs. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl in '99. They barely scored in that game because you finally had defenses that were catching up.
Yeah.
They barely scored in the Patriots Super Bowl, and they had a pick 6 on them because by then you've got film and you can catch up and do stuff.
Correct.
And
yeah,
that's the issue for Miami right now is that you're basically, I don't know, if football is rock, paper, scissors in a way of different schematic things you can do to try to beat different things, the Dolphins are just saying, yeah, we're just going to maximize scissors, and we're just going to do scissors every single time. And that's great because you're going to go against plenty of teams that are paper in the regular season. But when you get to the playoffs, you got to have variety. You have to look at the 07 Patriots.
Yeah.
As a team that could win.
Nope.
Sorry.
Nope.
Pain
Conversation's
point.
over. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Conversation.
But
no, you're right. You're right.
I have
the Jordan Love
question with the Tua thing, by the way.
The Jordan Love, though, for me, it makes sense. They gave him enough time. You're at that point where you don't have a choice now. You have to extend him. He looked like a dominant player last year. You only got one season of it. I get that. If they've been seeing that in practice and they got it, now they got it finally for the first time because Rodgers is gone, I think that you can say, okay, we feel good enough about this. They, on the other hand, have a fairly young team. Their offense is pretty young, which is a stark difference between them and Miami. And so I think that it's a lot of money. And it's funny that 13 months ago, we were all asking whether or not he could actually play as a quarterback in the NFL. But I think it's worth it.
Yeah. No, I think the Jordan Love contract is fine. Right? That's what you got to do. Quarterbacks are expensive. You pay that guy because of where you are in your team build and what he has shown.
Yeah.
I want to go back in time with Tua for a second. Kind of now that you know the contract that he ends up getting.
Yep.
You are GM of the Miami Dolphins.
Yep.
And it is March 2024. Your options are pay Tua Tagovailoa this contract.
Yep.
Trade him and use the draft picks to pick Bo Nix or Michael Penix in this year's draft. Or, maybe we throw JJ McCarthy in there depending on how high up you can get.
Yep.
Or option number 3 is trade him, get draft picks, and go out and sign Kirk Cousins. Of those 3 options, which one do you think you would do?
I would 1,000% have signed Kirk Cousins and taken a ton of draft capital. I just don't.
That is exactly where I land on that too.
I mean, Kirk Cousins is the perfect guy for that offense. He's a perfect fit. He's a little bit older, doesn't have a ton of time left. You get him, you get draft picks back for Tua, and you plug him into that offense right away, and you say, we are trying to win now. Right? Yep. And so, and Old Man Mob says about Penix, I understand it too. Penix is a great deep ball thrower. He also, can't stay healthy and has got bad knees already. Yeah. I worry about that. I also worry about Kirk Cousins coming off of a torn Achilles. So like,
well, and I also worry about Tua Tagovailoa with his injury history as well. You got
that's right. So that's the other part of it. But
yeah. I totally agree with you on the Kirk Cousins thing, and I look at this reminds me of when the Rams paid Jared Goff back in the day, and I look at both of these, and one of the justifications for paying Jared Goff when you pay him is that we have an offensive genius head coach. And that's going to help develop Jared Goff and turn him into the best thing he can be. And we're going to capitalize on that in this offense, which doesn't make sense to me because if your coach is that much of an offensive genius, you should not be paying a ton of money to a quarterback who, when you max out with the genius, is, a fringe top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Right.
You should be either going for a guy who, when you maximize him, is a top 5, top 3 guy, which is kind of what the Rams ended up doing. They go in for Matthew Stafford.
Yep.
Or you have to take a risk. You trade him and you say, we're going to go back into this rookie QB thing, and we're going to hope it works. And obviously that's, we all know quarterbacks are hard to find, but if you truly believe that your coach is that kind of an offensive genius, and especially, with the weapons that they have down in Miami, I think you could put in a rookie quarterback and get average NFL quarterback play this year because the offense is pretty good and they got good weapons. And when he's healthy and out there, it's going to work.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd rather take that risk and then take that extra money that you are saving and invest it in the defense where your coach isn't as good.
I would agree.
So doubling down on this when I think the best case, like if Tua ends up being a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, I will eat a lot of words on this.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. I think he's a guy who is between, the 13th, 14th best quarterback in the NFL to like the 7th best, depending on what day we're talking about and how well people are playing in his supporting cast and all that.
Yeah.
Which might win you a Super Bowl, but a lot's going to have to go in your favor to make that happen. And how are you going to make that all go in your favor when you're paying $60 million a year or whatever it is for him?
And that's really what it comes down to,
And Tyreek Hill, I think, said he's going to retire on the younger side too. At least he has previously said that. So what do you do in a couple of years when you're paying your quarterback this much money? You've lost Tyreek Hill. You've lost Teron Armstead because he's going to retire by that point.
Right.
And now it's just Jalen Waddle and Tua. I'm I don't think that'll be awful, but you're going to have to rebuild your offensive line and replace defensive stars and try to replace Tyreek Hill all at the same time when you can't pay a ton of money in free agency for guys. I think I'd take my chances with the draft picks. It's hard. It's a ballsy call because you can get fired if you mess that up. You could be run out of town by November this year if you mess that up.
Right.
But
I know. I'm with you. I wouldn't have done it, but I understand I get it. And they just have a lot of confidence in what they're doing down there, and maybe it'll work. I don't think it will, but maybe it will. You never know. So,
if the Jets are still looking for whoever the next guy is after Aaron Rodgers in a couple of years, and the Dolphins are just kind of middling, trying to figure out the next iteration after Tyreek Hill goes in a couple of years, the AFC East starts to look pretty wide open, at least for the spot behind Buffalo. And Buffalo is going to be very reliant on this year's draft class and the next 2 draft classes to reload that supporting cast.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, old man Mob was a good question about Dak. I don't want to touch that yet because we got to go. We're an hour and a half in here. We got to go. But I think the Dak question is something we should talk about soon, and we'll see what happens. But, anyways, all right. Thanks for coming through, guys. We appreciate it. And as Matt said, we'll be back Thursday night at our normal time, probably during the Hall of Fame game, and we'll all be wishing that we didn't ask for football.
We'll be on by the time you guys have turned that on and went, oh yeah, this game is boring, and then turned it back off.
Right, exactly. So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in as always. Thank you to the chat for asking some great questions and participating as always. And we will see you on Thursday night.